It was a calm Wednesday morning at Lincoln Elementary School. The sun filtered softly through the tall windows of the main hallway, casting dappled light across freshly polished floors. Everything was as it always was, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the distant rhythm of a copier, and the occasional high-pitched laughter echoing from the second-grade hallway. In room 4B, Ms. Reyes had just finished explaining a math game to her students. The air was filled with the sound of shuffling notebooks and excited whispers as the kids prepared for what they thought would be the highlight of their day, a live demonstration by the local K-9 unit. The event had been planned for weeks. Lincoln Elementary had been selected by the city as one of several schools to participate in a public outreach initiative with the police department. The idea was simple: build trust between kids and law enforcement while showcasing how police dogs worked. Officer Diaz, a tall, composed man with a calm demeanor, stepped into the classroom right on time, holding the leash of a muscular German shepherd named Max. Max was no ordinary dog. With over 6 years of service, Max had helped in more than 24 narcotics busts and had been featured in the local news twice. He was a legend in the K-9 division. "Good morning, everyone," Officer Diaz announced with a friendly smile. "Good morning," the children chorused, some sitting up straighter, others barely able to contain their excitement. Max stood tall and alert, his black and tan fur groomed to perfection. His amber eyes scanned the room, expression unreadable. "This is Max," Officer Diaz continued. "He's been trained to detect drugs, explosives, and certain chemicals. He also helps us in search and rescue operations. Today, we'll show you how he uses his nose to find hidden substances." The children clapped as Max sat obediently at Officer Diaz's side. Everything was going smoothly. The shift. Officer Diaz walked Max around the classroom as part of the routine. The dogs sniffed backpacks lined neatly near the cubbies, passed under the teacher's desk, circled the coat rack. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, Max stopped. It was sudden. He froze mid-step, ears perked sharply forward, gaze fixed on the far wall. There, a large painting hung, part of the school's art project the previous year. It was a vibrant collage of student handprints forming a tree, each leaf labeled with words like kindness, hope, and courage. Max's body tensed. He growled once, low, deliberate. Officer Diaz paused, tightening the leash. "Max, what is it, boy?" Then came the bark. One, then another, sharp, commanding. The entire classroom went still. The children flinched. A few gasped. Ms. Reyes stood up, eyebrows knitted in confusion. Without waiting for a command, Max lunged, not at a person, but directly at the painting. He scratched furiously at the wall beneath it. His nose pressed hard against the paneling. Everyone stepped back. Officer Diaz said quickly, now kneeling to restrain Max. "What's happening?" Ms. Reyes asked, voice tight with concern. "I don't know yet," Diaz admitted, eyes locked on his dog. Max wasn't playing or making a mistake. His behavior was focused, urgent, trained, uncovering something strange. Officer Diaz stood and addressed the class. Ms. Reyes, can you please take the students to the library? We need to check something. Without hesitation, Ms. Reyes gathered the children. Some of them asked questions. Is Max okay? Is it a bad guy? Did someone hide candy? But she hushed them gently and led them out of the room. When the last child left, Diaz unhooked Max's leash. The dog returned immediately to the spot and resumed his digging. Behind the painting, the drywall appeared untouched. No obvious signs of tampering. But Max's intensity was undeniable. There was something there. Diaz tapped his radio. Dispatch. This is Officer Diaz. I need backup and a facilities officer at Lincoln Elementary. Room 4B. Possible discovery behind classroom wall. K-9 unit reacting aggressively. Copy that. Backup en route. A janitor named Tito, who had been sweeping the cafeteria hallway, was the first to respond. What's going on? He asked as he entered. Wide-eyed. Can you help me remove this paneling? Diaz asked. Behind the mural, Max thinks there's something there. Tito nodded, already pulling a flathead screwdriver from his belt. The panel. With some effort, the painting was lifted off its frame and leaned against the opposite wall. Behind it, the drywall seemed ordinary, but Tito pressed his ear to it and frowned. There's a draft, he muttered. You feel that? Diaz stepped closer. True enough. A faint stream of cool air was escaping through a near-invisible seam between panels. Together, they began removing the section of wall. As each screw came loose, Max grew more animated, tail straight, nose twitching. The final panel dropped with a muted thud. Behind it was nothing at first. Just darkness. But then, as Diaz shone his flashlight, something came into view. A hidden recess, maybe 3 feet deep, had been carved out between the classroom and the storage closet behind it. And in that space lay an old wooden box, dusty and sealed with a padlock. The two men exchanged a look. The box. Don't touch it yet, Diaz warned, holding up a hand. He called it in. Soon, more officers arrived. The principal was notified. The hallway was closed off. News traveled fast. Within the hour, the entire faculty was whispering about the box behind the art wall. The box was eventually taken in for inspection. Officer Diaz remained silent about the contents. All he said was, "It's not drugs. But it's not nothing." What the school didn't expect. The next day, Lincoln Elementary was on every local news station. The box, it turned out, contained photographs, dozens of them, showing activities that should never have happened inside any school. There were old staff IDs, handwritten letters, and evidence pointing to a cover-up involving someone who had once worked at the school 2 decades ago. It sparked an investigation that went far beyond Room 4B. The school was rattled, but no one was more shaken than Ms. Reyes, who had taught in that room for 8 years and never once suspected what was hidden just a few feet from her desk. And Max, he was calm again, as if the mission was done. As if he had only been waiting for the right time to show everyone what had been hidden beneath layers of silence and drywall. The last of the drywall had been carefully removed, and for a moment, There was only silence in the room. Max, the K9, now sat at Officer Diaz's heel, no longer barking but still visibly alert. His eyes locked onto the wall where the painting had hung just minutes earlier. Officer Diaz stood in front of the exposed section and tapped lightly on it again. Knock knock, a hollow thud echoed back. Deeper than it should have for a simple wall. "There's something behind here," he said, turning to Tito, the janitor, who was already reaching for his flashlight. The exposed space behind the mural was clean, unnaturally so. No dust, no cobwebs, just smooth wallboard painted to blend in. But more importantly, there was a faint seam visible along a square shape. Not part of the original construction. "It's a false panel," Diaz muttered. He pressed his fingers along the edge, searching for a latch or groove. Tito pointed to a small indentation near the bottom right corner. "Try there." With a little pressure, the panel gave way, swinging open like the door of a hidden cabinet. Behind it was something no one expected to find in an elementary classroom. A safe. A hidden compartment. The safe was built directly into the wall. Black metal, combination dial, and heavy enough that it must have been installed before the drywall was even finished. No labels. No markings. No dust. Diaz stepped back. "I've worked cases with safes in drug houses. In pawn shops. Even in warehouses. But not in a fourth-grade classroom." Tito swallowed hard. "What the hell's in there?" "That's what we're going to find out." Diaz radioed in again. This time, the language was more serious. "Lincoln Elementary, Room 4B. We've located a hidden safe behind a false wall. Requesting immediate response from Special Investigations. Possible evidence of illegal activity on school property. Copy that." Dispatch responded. ETA, 15 minutes. The classroom was sealed. Officers cleared the hallway. Students were moved into the gymnasium for a surprise, extended recess, and staff were kept out under administrative lockdown. Outside, a black SUV pulled up. Two detectives from the city's Special Investigations Unit stepped out, Detective Marquez and Agent Lin. Both seasoned and unshakable. Diaz briefed them quickly. Max stayed near the door, watchful. Opening the vault, Marquez knelt in front of the safe. No brand name, no serial, old-school dial lock. This wasn't meant to be found. What kind of person installs a vault behind a student mural? Agent Lin asked. "No one who's innocent," Diaz replied flatly. "They called in a safe technician. It took 30 minutes of careful maneuvering, decoding pressure points, and using a fiber optic scope to finally hear the click of the lock giving way." Everyone in the room held their breath. Marquez opened the door slowly, flashlight in hand. Inside, at first, was only darkness. Then, a small metal box, a thick envelope, a USB flash drive, and a large Ziploc bag full of tightly wrapped bundles of cash, thousands of pesos. Maybe hundreds of thousands. Lying underneath it all were printed photographs. Marquez removed them carefully and laid them on a clean table, one by one. As the images came into view, silence fell like a slab of concrete. What was inside? There were photos. Dozens. maybe more, each one printed, trimmed, and labeled with handwritten dates. And they weren't random snapshots, they were surveillance shots. Images of students. In classrooms. In changing areas. Even in the nurse's office. Some were zoomed in, grainy, clearly taken from hidden cameras. "No," Diaz muttered. "You've got to be kidding me." It was every parent's worst nightmare. Agent Lin opened the envelope. Inside were receipts, untraceable prepaid cards, parcel shipping slips to unknown addresses, cash deposit slips for non-identifiable shell accounts. There were also pieces of folded paper, notes, instructions, some in code. She turned to Diaz. "This isn't just creepy. This is systemic, organized. Someone used this school as part of something bigger." Backtracking the source, Tito, who had been watching in horror, spoke up. "That wall's been there a long time. I've been janitor here since 2011. That mural, it was painted in 2021. But that panel, that safe, could have been there 10, 15 years before." Diaz's mind raced. Who had access to this classroom? Tito shrugged. Teachers, subs, aides. But that corner, he pointed at the hidden compartment, always had that painting over it. Never thought to look behind. Marquez asked for the teacher assignment records going back 20 years. Diaz, meanwhile, reviewed security footage, logs, staff lists. Whoever built that safe hadn't done it alone. Whoever planted those cameras hadn't acted impulsively. A name emerges. An hour later, a match came through. One of the receipts inside the envelope matched a shipment made over a decade ago, signed by a D. Alvarez, a former school counselor who had left Lincoln Elementary in 2014 amid vague rumors of misconduct, but was never formally charged with anything. At the time, no one had pursued it. Allegations were brushed off. No concrete evidence had surfaced. Until now. Alona's classroom shattered. Word spread. Parents demanded answers. The school district called an emergency meeting. Room 4B was permanently closed for renovation. Ms. Reyes was placed on temporary leave, not as punishment, but for her own protection. She cried when Diaz told her the truth. "I taught in that room for 8 years," she whispered, "and the entire time, I didn't know." "No one blames you," Diaz said gently, but he knew the guilt wouldn't go away easily. The community reacts. Within 48 hours, the story exploded. News vans parked outside the school. Angry protests erupted at the school board office. Parents clutched their children closer. And the students, confused, scared, asking questions no child should have to ask. The staff at Lincoln Elementary held a closed-door vigil for the victims, known and unknown. Photos were not released to the public. The school offered counseling, paid for trauma specialists, and promised a total rebuild of Room 4B. But something deeper had broken: trust. And Max? He returned to his handler's side like nothing had happened. To him, it was another job, another cent, another success. But to Lincoln Elementary, Max wasn't just a dog anymore. He was the reason a silent horror had finally been unburied. He was the voice for the voiceless. The bark that cracked the wall wide open. The storm didn't end with the discovery of the safe. In fact, for the investigative team, it had only just begun. Detective Marquez and Agent Lin worked late into the night inside a makeshift command center set up in the school library. Files covered an entire table: incident reports, staff records, old floor plans of Lincoln Elementary. Surveillance logs were being reviewed frame by frame. Officer Diaz sat with his elbows on his knees. Deep in thought, Max lay beside him, tail still, but ears perked at every sound, ever alert. As if he, too, was waiting for something more. The breakthrough on camera. At 1:17 a.m. A breakthrough arrived. A technician shouted, "Stop the playback. Rewind 3 minutes." There, on the monitor, a black and white feed from a rear hallway camera flickered. The timestamp read 3 weeks prior. The frame showed a figure slipping in through the faculty entrance, hood up. Moving with practiced silence. The hallway was dark, the overhead motion sensor lights delayed by a few seconds. But the camera caught just enough. The figure walked with purpose toward room 4B. A large duffel bag hung from their shoulder. "Freeze that frame," Marquez ordered. The image sharpened slightly. The figure turned just enough for a profile to emerge. A tired but unmistakable face. Dean Alvarez, a former guidance counselor at Lincoln Elementary. He had left the district nearly a decade ago, under the cloud of an internal investigation into alleged misconduct. At the time, no charges were filed. No parents pressed charges. There were rumors, quiet ones, whispers, but lacking hard evidence. The administration had let him resign quietly. No lawsuit, no publicity. They thought it was over. It wasn't. The secret installation. Alvarez had returned. And not just once. A full review of 3 months' worth of security footage showed him slipping into the building multiple times. Always between midnight and 3 a.m. Always entering through the rear service door using what looked like an old faculty keycard. On 2 occasions, he carried a cordless drill. Another time, blueprints. He wasn't just visiting. He was modifying something, strengthening the hidden wall, reinforcing the compartment, reinstalling the camera system. He had planned everything with care. And no one noticed. Max remembers. Diaz rubbed his temples, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Then something clicked in his memory. "Wait," he said aloud. Max reacted to Alvarez before. Lin looked up. "When? 2 years ago. We were assisting on a narcotics case at a youth shelter downtown. Max got jumpy around one of the dorms. We couldn't find anything, but the guy running that shelter, Dean Alvarez, we didn't connect it back then." "Wait. Are you saying Max remembered the scent?" Diaz nodded slowly. He was trained to recognize both substances and people. His scent memory goes back years. If Max reacted to the classroom, it wasn't just the cache. It was Alvarez, unmasking the predator. With renewed urgency, Lin requested a full background check. Dean Alvarez had been moving quietly through various youth programs since leaving Lincoln Elementary. Summer camps, private tutoring, volunteer work at shelters. No long-term employment, no digital footprint. But everywhere he went, The pattern was the same: short contracts, frequent night shifts, and quiet resignations following whispers of inappropriate behavior. Still, no charges ever stuck. "He moves like smoke," Marquez muttered. "And he's smart. Knows the law, knows school protocols. And he knows how to scare kids into silence." Locating the suspect, with security footage in hand and evidence mounting, a warrant was secured for Alvarez's current known address, an apartment complex near the border of 2 districts. When the team arrived, the unit was empty. No personal items, no photos, just an unplugged TV, a mattress, and a half-eaten sandwich in the fridge. But there was something else. Behind a loose panel under the kitchen sink was a secondary hard drive, encrypted. The tech team took it back for decryption. And on Max's command, the team began sweeping the building. Outside, Max stiffened, nose high. He barked once, then bolted toward the basement. The chase in the shadows. The officers followed. In the basement's far corner, they found a supply closet with the door slightly ajar. Inside, crouched behind paint cans and tools, was a man, thin, haggard, eyes wide with fear. Dean Alvarez. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hands and closed his eyes as Max barked. Teeth bared but held back by Diaz's command. "You should have stayed gone," Diaz muttered. Confession or cowardice. Back at the station, Alvarez said little during questioning. He denied the photos, denied knowledge of the safe, denied ever returning to Lincoln Elementary. But when presented with the footage, his image, time-stamped, entering the school, he simply closed his eyes and whispered, "They were never supposed to find it." "Who else is involved?" Agent Lin demanded. Silence. "Are there more safes? Other schools?" Alvarez stared at the wall. "It's not just about schools. It's about who no one notices." Wider conspiracy. The encrypted hard drive revealed directories labeled with initials, birth dates, and locations, some in other cities. Some linked to former teachers, coaches, tutors. It wasn't just Alvarez. He was part of a network. Lincoln Elementary had been one of many. Fallout. When news broke, the public reaction was fierce. Investigations were launched across 3 school districts. Retired administrators were called back for questioning. Parents demanded resignations. Protests formed outside City Hall. And inside Lincoln Elementary, Room 4B remained sealed. But its silence now spoke volumes. It became a symbol of what was hidden, and what could be uncovered, if someone dared to look. Max, the unlikely hero. Days later, at a school-wide assembly, Officer Diaz stood at the podium beside Max, who wore a polished K9 badge on his collar. "This dog," Diaz said, voice strong, "didn't just sniff out danger. He brought truth to light. In a place where no one expected darkness." Max barked once, almost on cue. The students cheered. For the first time since the discovery, the school felt united, not by fear, but by resolve. The lead came in on a foggy Thursday morning, quiet, like the eye of a storm. A clerk at a run-down lodging house in the industrial district of East Marston had called the tip line after seeing the man's face on the news. He didn't give his name. Just said, "One of the guys staying here looks a lot like that teacher. The one on TV." Detective Marquez arrived within 20 minutes. Along with Agent Lynn, Officer Diaz, and one very alert K9 named Max. The building was 5 stories of decaying concrete, rust-streaked windows, and a broken elevator. It reeked of damp wood, fried food, and lives long abandoned. "Room 4C, the clerk told them, trembling slightly. He paid cash. Real quiet. Comes and goes through the fire escape sometimes." Diaz looked at Max. The dog was already sniffing the air. Muscles tense, tail stiff. He wasn't barking, but he wasn't calm either. The team moved in. The setup. The plan was simple. No sirens. No spotlight. Alvarez couldn't know they were coming. If he ran, they'd risk losing him for good. 2 officers secured the stairwells. 1 covered the rear alley. Marquez and Lynn took the lead, with Diaz and Max behind. As they crept up the narrow hall toward room 4C, Max began to growl, not loud, but low and resonant, a warning. His nose twitched, head slightly lowered, gaze fixed on the door ahead. "That's it," Diaz whispered. "He's here." The standoff. Marquez knocked once. Firmly. "Mr. Alvarez, this is the police. We need you to open the door." Silence. Then movement. A shadow across the peephole. Footsteps inside. Hurried. Shuffling. "Mr. Alvarez, open the door now." A pause. Then a voice, hoarse, tired, barely audible through the wood. "You can't prove anything. We already did," Lynn said flatly. "We have the USB. We have the photos. We have the footage. You're done." Another pause. Then the rattle of a chain lock. Click. Slowly, the door opened 2 inches. Max lunged. A deafening bark exploded through the hallway, followed by another, sharp, primal, charged with fury. He pulled on the leash, paws clawing at the floor, teeth bared. The calm, disciplined Max was gone. This was instinct. This was recognition. This was justice. Alvarez flinched. "What the hell?" he stammered, backing away. Diaz held Max tightly. "You remember him, don't you?" Alvarez paled. The door swung fully open. He tried to bolt, but it was too late. Lynn was on him in seconds. Alvarez hit the floor face first. Hands twisted behind his back. Diaz called it in. Marquez secured the room. Max stood above the man, snarling, every muscle tense, tail unmoving. "The arrest. You really thought you could run," Diaz said, looking down at the broken man in cuffs. "But you didn't count on one thing, did you?" Alvarez looked up, defiant at first. Then his eyes landed on Max. The defiance melted. "You're the dog from the school," he whispered. Diaz nodded. "Max remembered your scent. From the shelter. From Lincoln Elementary. From everything you left behind. You train him to remember that long?" Alvarez muttered, half to himself. "No," Diaz replied. "They just don't forget evil." Alvarez didn't speak again, processing the predator. Back at headquarters, the booking was swift. Alvarez was charged with possession of illicit surveillance equipment, unlawful entry, child exploitation, and obstruction of justice. Dozens of new counts were expected to follow as the investigation expanded. His arrest made national news. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Parents carried signs. Former students cried on camera. Donations flooded survivor support programs. And across districts, more hidden cameras were found in unused storage rooms, defunct locker rooms, staff offices. The scale of the network Alvarez had helped construct was worse than anyone imagined. But he was no longer hidden. He was exposed. Max, the nose that knew. Later that evening, after the chaos settled, Diaz knelt beside Max outside the station. The dog sat quietly, head against his handler's chest, as if sensing that the day had taken something heavy from everyone. "You did good, partner," Diaz said softly. "Real good." Max closed his eyes. It wasn't glory he wanted. Not a treat. Not a trophy. Just that moment. That stillness where he could finally let go. Lincoln Elementary rebuilds. Weeks passed. Lincoln Elementary began the painful process of healing. Room 4B was gutted entirely. The mural was taken down, not to be destroyed, but preserved as a symbol of what was hidden in plain sight. A plaque would soon accompany it, for every voice that was silenced, and every truth that was buried. May this wall never be silent again. Ms. Reyes returned, not to teach right away, but to volunteer as a mentor for new educators, helping them learn what to watch for, what not to ignore. A visit to the school. One Friday afternoon, Diaz brought Max back to Lincoln Elementary. Not for a case. Just a visit. The students cheered when they saw him. Some ran to pet Max. Others drew pictures of him. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He was calm, grounded, whole. Principal Soriano approached with tearful eyes. That dog. He did more than most people ever could. Diaz just smiled. He listens when no one else does. Closure. But not the end. Dean Alvarez faced life in prison. More arrests followed. The network crumbled. Survivors spoke up, some for the first time in decades. Their stories were different, but their pain was shared. And their healing, while slow, had begun. It was Max who had triggered it all. Not a detective. Not a politician. A dog with a memory for wrongness. A nose for buried truths. And a heart that only wanted to protect. The halls of Lincoln Elementary had changed. The once vibrant murals that lined the corridors now bore subtle additions, handprints in gold, dedications in white ink, and framed student essays about truth, trust, and courage. Room 4B had been sealed permanently, not out of shame, but as a mark of remembrance. The school had learned not to forget. And neither had the people. A simple ceremony for a silent hero. It was a clear autumn morning when the students, parents, and staff gathered in the school courtyard. No balloons. No marching bands. Just rows of folding chairs. A modest podium, and a handmade banner that read, "Thank you, Max, our hero in silence." At the center of the stage stood Officer Diaz in full uniform. By his side, Max, polished coat gleaming, calm eyes scanning the crowd, stood with quiet dignity. The applause began soft but swelled as Max walked forward. Some children waved. A few clapped with wide, open-mouthed admiration. Others simply watched in awe, unable to reconcile how a dog could change the course of their lives. Principal Soriano stepped up to the microphone. "Today is not just a celebration of bravery," she began, her voice steady. "It is a moment to honor something many people forget to see: those who protect us in silence." She paused and turned to Max. "There are heroes who speak loudly, and then there are heroes like Max, whose voice was never words, but warning, who barked when no one else dared to speak, who listened when no one else paid attention. The parents speak." After Principal Soriano spoke, a line of parents stepped up, one by one, to say thank you. Some cried. Some stood stiffly, overwhelmed by emotion. One mother, her voice trembling, addressed Max directly. "You didn't just sniff out danger. You uncovered the lies that we, parents, were too scared to see. You gave us back our children." A father placed a single white rose on a small podium beside Max. "To the dog who barked louder than all the whispers," he said. A quiet child's whisper, at the edge of the crowd. A girl no older than 9 clutched her mother's hand. Her name was Sam. She had been one of the children unknowingly caught in the hidden surveillance discovered in room 4B. She had withdrawn afterward, speaking only in short sentences, mostly through her drawings. But today, as Max passed by her, she gently pulled free from her mother's hand. She walked forward, knelt beside Max, and whispered, "If it weren't for Max, maybe no one would have ever known." Diaz's eyes welled up. Max leaned forward and rested his head gently against the girl's shoulder. The badge of silence. The final moment of the ceremony came with little fanfare. Principal Soriano retrieved a small velvet box from the podium and opened it slowly. Inside was a custom K9 badge, silver, polished, shaped like a shield, etched into its center. Max, Bayani Ng Katahimakan, Hero of Silence. She knelt and pinned it to Max's service harness. The crowd stood and applauded. There were no loud speeches, no chants, just one long, unified moment of recognition for a creature who had said nothing, yet had spoken volumes. A city responds. News of the ceremony spread fast. TV stations aired a montage of Max's career, from training days to the dramatic capture of Dean Alvarez. Social media overflowed with tributes, student art, and hashtags like #Salamat Max and #Voice of the Voiceless. The local government issued a formal commendation, but Diaz declined interviews. This was never about the spotlight. He told reporters, this was about doing the right thing, even when no one's looking. Moving forward, Lincoln Elementary launched a program inspired by Max, Listen to Silence. A district-wide training for teachers and staff to identify hidden signs of abuse and misconduct. Every new employee now walked through a section of the school dedicated to Max's Wall. where kids could write or draw anonymously. In one corner of the wall, in carefully written print, someone had written, "Sometimes silence has a voice, and sometimes that voice is the bark of a loyal friend." Max's retirement. A few months later, Max was formally retired from active duty. Not because he was weak or old. He was still strong, still sharp, but because some chapters, once closed, deserve peace. Diaz brought him home to live with his family in the suburbs. Max had his own space in the backyard, a soft bed inside the living room, and a water bowl etched with the word "champion." He went on walks every morning, watched over Diaz's kids as they played, sat on the porch as sunsets painted the sky. Epilogue: the bark that broke the wall. They say not all heroes wear capes. Some wear collars. And not all voices shout. Some bark. In the quiet moments after the ceremony, long after the folding chairs were packed away, and the crowd had dispersed, Max remained on the stage. Diaz sat beside him, arm draped over his shoulder. The sky was golden. A breeze passed gently through the trees. Diaz whispered, "You gave them something no one else could. You made him feel safe again." Max said nothing. He didn't need to. His work was done.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.